The central post office became busy long before most of the city woke up. Delivery trucks arrived one after another, bringing thousands of letters and packages from nearby towns and distant cities. Workers pushed large carts across the sorting floor, while machines scanned envelopes and sent them in different directions. Some employees checked addresses by hand, while others prepared bags for the morning delivery routes. The building was full of movement, but everyone knew exactly what they had to do because they had followed the same routine for years. Adrian Brooks walked through the front entrance at 7:45, carrying a small lunch bag and a dark blue umbrella still covered with raindrops. The security guard smiled as soon as he saw him. "Good morning, Adrian." "Good morning, Mr. Collins. You are early again. I like a quiet start before the busy hours begin." Mr. Collins laughed softly. "One day I'll arrive before you. I've been hearing that for 3 years." The two men shared a smile before Adrian continued toward the sorting room. His desk stood near the back of the large hall beside a row of tall windows. From there, he could see the loading area where drivers prepared their vans before leaving for different neighborhoods. Before touching a single letter, Adrian followed the same routine every morning. He placed his lunch inside the staff refrigerator, cleaned his desk with a soft cloth, arranged his notebook beside a small desk calendar, and checked that his reading glasses were exactly where he had left them the day before. Some people thought his habits were unnecessary, but Adrian believed that careful work usually began with careful preparation. Life often becomes busy without warning, and simple routines help people stay calm when unexpected problems appear. He had learned that lesson years ago, and it had helped him more times than he could remember. A loud voice suddenly interrupted the quiet morning. "Adrian, did you organize your pencils by size again?" Adrian looked up and smiled. Oliver Hayes walked toward him carrying 2 cups of coffee. Unlike Adrian, Oliver never seemed to worry about small details. His shirt sleeves were already rolled up, his tie was slightly loose, and he always looked as though he had started talking before finishing his first cup of coffee. "I only have 2 pencils," Adrian replied. "I know," Oliver said with a grin. "That somehow makes it even funnier." He placed 1 cup of coffee on Adrian's desk. "Thanks. You can thank me by taking lunch before 3 o'clock today." "I'll try. You said that yesterday. And the day before." Oliver shook his head. "You spend more time taking care of other people's mail than taking care of yourself." Adrian smiled but said nothing. The morning work soon began. Large containers filled with letters arrived every few minutes, and employees spread across the room to begin sorting them. Adrian checked addresses that were difficult to read, corrected small mistakes when possible, and searched the computer system whenever a package seemed to have the wrong destination. Around 10 o'clock, an elderly man walked slowly to the customer service counter carrying a worn brown envelope. "I think this letter belongs to my daughter," he said. "It was delivered to my old house after I moved." Adrian invited him to sit down. "Let's have a look." The address on the front had faded after years in a mailbox, but Adrian carefully compared it with the postal records. "I found her new address," he said a few moments later. The old man's face brightened immediately. "I was afraid it would be too late." Adrian carefully wrote the correct address on a new label before attaching it to the envelope. "As long as someone keeps trying," he said, "it is not too late for a letter to find its home." The man smiled warmly. "I hope you're right." After the customer left, Oliver walked over carrying another stack of envelopes. "You always say things that make people feel better. I only tell them what I believe. And what do you believe?" Adrian looked at the letter disappearing into the outgoing mailbag. I believe people should never give up on reaching someone they care about. Oliver nodded. I like that. The work continued until lunchtime. During the short break, several employees gathered in the staff kitchen, talking about football, weekend plans, and family holidays. Adrian listened more than he spoke, but he enjoyed hearing everyone laugh after a busy morning. When lunch ended, he returned to his desk and noticed a single white envelope resting neatly beside his keyboard. There was nothing unusual about the envelope itself. It was clean, plain, perfectly ordinary. There was no return address, only his name, Adrian Brooks, written in careful blue ink. Oliver leaned closer. Who's it from? I don't know. You recognize the handwriting. Adrian looked at the envelope for several seconds before answering. I've seen it before. Then open it. Adrian gently turned the envelope over in his hands. The seal remained untouched. For a moment, it looked as though he might finally open it. Instead, he quietly placed it inside the top drawer of his desk and closed it. Oliver stared at him. You're going to leave it there? I'll read it later. Oliver smiled. I've known you for 10 years. Whenever you say later, it usually means you're worried about something. Adrian gave a small laugh, but it sounded tired. Maybe. The afternoon passed, yet Adrian opened the drawer several times without touching the envelope. Every time he looked at it, he closed the drawer again and returned to work. As the last employees prepared to go home, Oliver picked up his coat. Are you finally taking that letter with you? Adrian nodded. He waited until the room was empty before opening the drawer. Oliver had expected him to pick up one envelope. Instead, Adrian lifted a small wooden box from the back of the drawer. He opened the lid slowly. Inside lay 6 more unopened envelopes. Each one carried the same blue handwriting. Each one had no return address. Each one was addressed to only one person, Adrian Brooks. Adrian quietly placed the newest envelope on top of the others, closed the wooden box, and locked it again. Outside, the rain began to fall once more, but Adrian remained standing beside his desk, wondering how many more unopened envelopes could fit inside the box before he finally found the courage to read the first one. Before I share the rest of the story, I need to know, where are you listening from? I would love to hear from you. The rain continued throughout the night, and by the next morning, the streets around the central post office were covered with puddles that reflected the gray sky above. Delivery vans arrived later than usual because several roads outside the city had flooded during the storm. Inside the sorting hall, however, work began as it always did. Employees unpacked heavy mailbags, checked delivery schedules, and prepared thousands of letters for another busy day. Adrian unlocked his desk before anyone else arrived. The small wooden box was exactly where he had left it. For a few seconds, he simply looked at it without moving. He knew that opening the lid would take only a moment. Reading the first letter would probably take less than 5 minutes. Yet those 5 minutes somehow felt heavier than the entire day's work waiting outside his office. Instead of opening the box, he placed it back inside the drawer and locked it again. Just then, Oliver walked into the room carrying 2 cups of coffee. I had a feeling I'd find you here, he said. You usually do. Oliver placed 1 cup on the desk and looked toward the closed drawer. Did you read it last night? Adrian shook his head. No. Oliver looked surprised. You didn't even try? I thought about it. And? I couldn't. Oliver pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. I don't want to push you, Adrian, but I don't understand. Those letters can't stay closed forever. Adrian looked down at the warm coffee in his hands. I know. Oliver waited for him to continue. Instead, Adrian quietly changed the subject. We should start sorting today's mail. Oliver recognized the familiar escape. Adrian never refused difficult conversations directly. He simply stepped around them until the other person gave up asking. It was a habit that seemed harmless because it avoided arguments, yet it also left many important questions unanswered. People sometimes believe they are protecting themselves by delaying uncomfortable moments. But delayed conversations often grow larger inside the mind than they ever would have been in reality. The morning quickly became busy. A delivery driver entered the sorting hall carrying 3 large sacks of registered mail. Bad weather everywhere, he announced while wiping rain from his jacket. Half the highways were moving at walking speed. Several employees laughed. If the letters made it here, Oliver replied, we can handle the rest. Adrian joined the team, checking addresses and organizing special deliveries. Around midday, a young woman approached the customer service counter, holding a damaged envelope that had been torn during delivery. I'm worried something is missing, she said. Adrian carefully examined the envelope before opening it in front of her. Inside was a birthday card and several family photographs. Nothing had been lost. The young woman smiled with relief. I was afraid the pictures had fallen out. They're all here, Adrian said as he carefully placed everything into a protective envelope. She looked at the photographs before speaking again. My grandmother sent these. She always says printed photographs last longer than phone pictures. Adrian smiled. She's probably right. The woman thanked him before leaving the building. As Adrian watched her walk away holding the repaired envelope, a quiet thought crossed his mind. Some people protect memories inside photographs. Others protect them inside letters. Both become valuable because they remind us of people we never want to forget. The object itself is only paper, but the feelings attached to it can remain important for many years. That is why people should never judge another person's treasures too quickly, because something that looks ordinary on the outside may carry an entire lifetime of memories inside. During lunch, Oliver sat beside Adrian near the staff kitchen window. You've been quieter than usual. I've been thinking. I guessed that much. Oliver smiled before taking another bite of his sandwich. Can I ask one more question? You usually ask more than one. Fair point. He leaned back in his chair. Do those letters make you sad? Adrian looked out the window, where raindrops slowly slid down the glass. They make me uncertain. That's different. It feels different. Oliver nodded slowly. Sometimes uncertainty is harder than bad news. Adrian looked at him with mild surprise. I didn't expect you to say something so serious. Oliver laughed. I save my wise thoughts for rainy days. For the first time that day, Adrian laughed without forcing it. The afternoon passed peacefully until shortly before closing time. Margaret Wilson, the oldest employee in the building, walked toward Adrian's desk, carrying a thin gray folder. She had worked for the Postal Service for almost 40 years and seemed to remember every employee who had ever entered the building. Whenever someone needed advice, they usually visited Margaret before speaking to anyone else. I need your help, she said. Of course. She opened the folder. These letters have been sitting in storage for months because the addresses no longer exist. Adrian looked through them one by one. Most had already been marked "Return to Sender." One envelope, however, caught his attention. Across the front, Someone had written in careful handwriting, "Please don't stop trying." Adrian looked at the words for several seconds. Margaret noticed, "That one always makes me pause." "It does the same to me." She folded her hands together. "Do you know why I stayed in this job for so many years?" Adrian shook his head. "Because letters remind me that hope can travel a very long way." She smiled gently. "Sometimes hope arrives quickly. Sometimes it spends months lost between cities. But as long as someone keeps writing, they are still hoping to be heard." Her words stayed with Adrian long after she returned to her desk. When the building finally became quiet, Adrian collected his jacket and reached for his bag. Before leaving, he unlocked the drawer once again. He removed the wooden box. For the first time, he untied the blue ribbon wrapped around the envelopes. His fingers rested on the oldest letter. The paper had become slightly yellow with age, but the handwriting remained as neat as the day it had arrived. He slowly slid one finger beneath the edge of the envelope, then he stopped. A deep breath escaped his lips. Not today. He carefully tied the ribbon again. As he placed the letters back inside the box, something slipped from beneath the oldest envelope and landed softly on the desk. It was a small photograph. Adrian stared at it in complete silence. The picture showed him standing beside a young woman outside an old train station. Both of them were smiling. On the back of the photograph, written in the same blue handwriting as every unopened envelope, were only 7 simple words. "You promised we would always read together." Adrian remained at his desk long after the last employee had gone home. The lights in the sorting hall had already been switched off, leaving only a few lamps shining above the customer service area. Outside, the evening train slowly pulled away from the station across the street. Its distant whistle echoed through the quiet building, but Adrian barely noticed it. His eyes stayed fixed on the old photograph resting in his hands. The picture had clearly been taken several years earlier. The young woman beside him was laughing at something outside the camera, while Adrian was looking directly at her instead of the photographer. He could not remember the exact moment, but he remembered how happy he had felt that day. Some memories fade with time, yet a single photograph can suddenly bring back emotions that seemed lost forever. That is why many people keep old pictures even after years have passed. They do not preserve the past itself, but they remind us that certain moments once made our lives brighter. He turned the photograph over once again. "You promised we would always read together." The sentence was simple, but it carried more weight than he wanted to admit. Oliver's voice interrupted the silence. "I knew I'd find you here." Adrian looked up in surprise. "I thought you had already left." "I did," Oliver replied with a smile. "Then I remembered I forgot my car keys." He walked toward the desk and immediately noticed the photograph. "You finally opened one?" Adrian shook his head. "No." "Then where did that come from?" "It slipped out from underneath the oldest envelope." Oliver looked at the picture, but did not reach for it. "Is that her?" Adrian nodded slowly. "Yes." Oliver waited patiently. After several quiet seconds, Adrian finally spoke. "Her name is Emma." It was the first time he had spoken her name aloud inside the post office. Oliver pulled out a chair and sat beside him. "You've never told me about her." "I know. Were you together?" Adrian smiled faintly. "For a long time." He looked back at the photograph. "We met in a small bookstore near the university. I was looking for a history book, and she was trying to reach the same shelf. We both apologized at exactly the same time." Oliver laughed. "That sounds like you." She laughed too. A warm expression briefly appeared on Adrian's face before slowly fading. She always laughed first. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Sometimes silence feels uncomfortable because people have nothing to say. Other times, silence becomes a way of showing respect for someone's memories. Good friends understand the difference. They know that listening can be just as valuable as speaking, especially when another person is carrying emotions that have remained hidden for a long time. Oliver looked toward the wooden box. Did Emma write all of those letters? Yes. And you've never opened any of them? No. Oliver frowned gently. I still don't understand why. Adrian rested both hands on the desk. Because the last time I saw her, we didn't argue. Oliver looked surprised. You didn't? We smiled. Then what happened? Adrian let out a slow breath. We made plans for the following weekend. He paused for a moment before continuing. She said she had something important to tell me, but she wanted to wait until Saturday because she wanted enough time to explain everything. Oliver remained silent. I told her we could talk later, Adrian continued. I said I had too much work that evening. He lowered his eyes toward the photograph. Saturday never came. Oliver's expression changed immediately. What do you mean? She left the city unexpectedly the next morning. Without seeing you? Adrian nodded. I received her first letter 3 days later. Oliver looked toward the wooden box once again. And that's the letter you never opened? Yes. Why? Adrian answered without lifting his eyes. Because I kept thinking she would come back before I needed to read it. Oliver slowly leaned back in his chair. So every new letter made you believe the answer would be in the next conversation instead. Adrian looked at him with quiet surprise. I suppose it did. People often imagine that avoiding pain will make it disappear, but emotions rarely follow simple rules. When we postpone difficult truths, our imagination quietly begins filling empty spaces with endless possibilities. Those possibilities often become far more frightening than reality itself. Honest answers may hurt for a while, yet unanswered questions have a way of lasting much longer because the mind continues searching for endings that never arrive. The building had become completely silent. Oliver stood and picked up his keys from the corner of the desk. I won't tell you what to do, he said. I appreciate that. But I will tell you one thing. Adrian looked at him. Whatever is inside those letters has already been written. Keeping them closed won't change a single word. Oliver gave him a small smile before walking toward the exit. Good night, Adrian. Good night. After the door closed, Adrian found himself alone once again. He carefully returned the photograph to the desk and reached for the oldest envelope. This time, he did not hesitate immediately. He held the envelope with both hands and gently traced the edge of the paper with his thumb. The seal had remained unbroken for almost 2 years, yet it was still perfectly closed. He picked up the letter opener from his desk. Slowly, he placed its thin blade beneath the edge of the envelope. Just as he was about to break the seal, something caught his attention. Hidden beneath the flap, almost impossible to notice unless the envelope was held close to the light, was a short handwritten message. It was not part of the letter inside. It had been written on the envelope itself. Adrian moved closer to the desk lamp until he could finally read the tiny words. If you are opening this, I was right to keep waiting. If you liked this story, please like, comment, and share. More simple and emotional stories are coming soon.